this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. I woke up this morning with my mind.
Hello, hey everyone. Joey Sparks here. This is your reminder God's mercies are new. Once again this morning, the thrust of the theological argument in Hebrews is all about Jesus being better, Him being better than any aspect of the previous covenant. That was a big deal to the original audience because many of them were tempted to go back to that original covenant, abandon Christ and the new covenant. And chapter 4 closes by saying we don't have a high priest who cannot sympathize. We have a high priest, in fact, who has passed through the heavens and who can sympathize with us because he was tempted in every way as we are and yet did so without sin. What that does is it gives us confidence, it gives us boldness, and we can find mercy and grace in our times of need. Now, the rest of the theological argument, chapters 5 through 10, so 6 chapters, the author is coming back to this high priesthood of Jesus. That's something that we, without a Jewish background, we still fail to comprehend how important that high priesthood of Jesus is. But he introduces it at the end of chapter 4. Then chapter 5, he discusses it more at length in direct comparison to Aaron, the first high priest, and then obviously by implication, any high priest who would follow Aaron. And then in section of verses 5 through 10 of chapter 5, we see 5 reasons why Jesus is the better high priest. 5 reasons why Jesus is the better high priest. See if you can kind of pick these out as we read through the text. We'll summarize after we read, though. So also Christ did not exalt himself to be made a high priest, but was appointed by him who said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." He also says in another place, "You are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek." In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. Being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. The 6 verses, you have 5 reasons why Jesus has a superior priesthood than the previous priesthood, that of Aaron and any high priest who would follow. Number 1, God appointed him. Not only did God appoint Jesus just as he appointed every high priest, he did so ahead of time. He foreshadowed, he prophesied that Jesus would be this high priest, and he prophesied he would be such after the order of Melchizedek. So number 1, God appointed him. Christ did not decide himself to be the high priest for the people. Number 2, he suffered on behalf of sin, not offering a sacrifice for his own sin. See, the verses that we did not read that precede verse 5, that was an argument that's mentioned that the high priest had to offer a sacrifice for himself because he had sin himself. Well, Jesus didn't have to offer a sacrifice for himself, but he suffered on behalf of sin. That makes him better. Number 3, he suffered through his reverence. His supreme reverence for doing the will of God led him to suffer. And he suffered even before his actual death. He suffered in the moments leading up to his death. He suffered and he cried out in that suffering. Number 3, that was number 3. Number 4, he became the source of eternal salvation. The source of eternal salvation, not an ongoing sacrifice, but a once and for all sacrifice that thus provides eternal salvation for all who obey. Number 5, he became this high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Now, they probably did not see that argument coming, but they would have had this question in their minds. Ever since Jesus was called the high priest, they would have wondered, how in the world is that possible? Well, you see it foretold, prophesied, and then you see he is it's referenced once again in verse 10. He is this high priest after the order of Melchizedek, this obscure Old Testament figure to whom Abraham paid his tithes and gave his offerings. So those 5 reasons are why Jesus has a superior priesthood, is a better high priest. So today, he's serving on our behalf. His work, in many respects, was just beginning through the cross and the resurrection and the ascension. And now that he has turned his work on earth over to us, he sits at the throne of God doing his work now as our high priest. For that, we are eternally grateful. We thank you for your time today, and it's our prayer that God's timeless word will be your meditation all day long.
I woke up this morning